There is a specific kind of trust that holds society together. It is the invisible contract we sign every time we leave our house. When you walk into a coffee shop, you trust that the barista isn't going to poison you. When you get into an Uber, you trust that the driver is going to take you to your destination. And when you answer an ad online to buy baby clothes from another mother, you trust that you are walking into a home filled with empathy, shared experience, and safety. We assume that certain lines will never be crossed. We assume that there are crimes too horrific, too medieval, too gruesome for the modern world. We watch horror movies about monsters, but we tell ourselves that in real life, monsters don't live in suburban split-level houses. They don't have families. They don't post ads on Craigslist. But on a sunny morning in March 2015, a 26-year-old woman named Michelle Wilkins walked through a front door in Longmont, Colorado, and discovered that the monster was real. She discovered that the invisible contract had been shredded. Michelle was 7 months pregnant. She was glowing. She was excited. She was doing what every expectant mother does, nesting. She was preparing her world for the arrival of her daughter, Aurora. She went to that house looking for maternity clothes. She went there expecting a transaction between two moms. Instead, she walked into a trap so dark, so calculated, and so bloody that it shook the entire nation to its core. She didn't just get robbed. She didn't just get attacked. She woke up on a cold basement floor, locked in a room, bleeding out from a jagged incision across her stomach. And when she touched her belly, the belly that had been round and full just an hour ago, it was flat. In that moment, the human mind should break. The shock alone should stop the heart. The blood loss should cause unconsciousness within minutes. But Michelle Wilkins didn't break. Lying in her own blood, drifting in and out of consciousness, she realized that she was the only one who could save herself. She realized that if she closed her eyes, the truth of what happened in that basement would die with her. So she made a choice to reach for her phone, a choice to breathe, a choice to stay awake. This is the story of the woman who survived the unthinkable. It is the story of a mother's love that transcended physical trauma. And it is the story of how one woman's refusal to die exposed a level of evil that we wish didn't exist. If you want to understand the true definition of resilience, if you want to know what the human spirit looks like when it is stripped down to its rawest form, please hit that subscribe ** button right now. You need to hear this story because Michelle Wilkins is not just a survivor. She is a miracle. To understand the horror of that day, we have to understand the innocence that preceded it. Michelle Wilkins was in a beautiful season of her life. She was 26. She was an artist. She worked with ceramics. She was gentle, spiritual, and deeply connected to nature. She named her unborn daughter Aurora after the Roman goddess of the dawn. She was 7 months pregnant, that magical time where the baby is kicking, the nursery is being painted, and the anticipation is building. Like many young people in 2015, Michelle used Craigslist. It was a common way to find deals, to recycle goods, to connect with the community. She saw an ad for maternity clothes and baby items. It seemed perfect. The seller was a woman. It felt safe. She texted the number. They arranged a time. On March 18, 2015, Michelle drove her car to the address in Longmont. It was a normal neighborhood. The house was unremarkable. She walked up to the door. She knocked. The woman who answered the door was Dynel Lane. She was 34 years old. She looked normal. She was a former nurse's aide. She invited Michelle inside. Dynel Lane told Michelle that she, too, was pregnant. This immediately put Michelle at ease. It created a bond. They were just two pregnant women talking about bobbies, looking at clothes. Dynel led Michelle downstairs to the basement. She said that's where the clothes were. Michelle followed her. She didn't know that she was walking into a slaughterhouse. She didn't know that Dynel Lane wasn't pregnant. She didn't know that Dynel had been faking a pregnancy for months, fooling her husband, her family, and her friends. She didn't know that Dynel's due date was approaching, and she needed a baby, any baby, to keep the lie alive. In the basement, the atmosphere shifted. Michelle looked through the clothes. They chatted. But then Dynel started talking about unique baby names. She started getting intense. Michelle decided it was time to leave. She sensed a shift in energy. "I think I'm going to go now," Michelle said. She started walking up the stairs. This was the moment the trap snapped shut. Dynel Lane attacked. She grabbed Michelle. She began hitting her. Michelle was confused. "Why are you doing this?" she screamed. She fought back, but Michelle was small and she was heavily pregnant. Her center of gravity was off. She was protecting her stomach. Dynel Lane was relentless. She overpowered Michelle. She choked her. She choked her until the world went black. When Michelle woke up, she was groggy. She was lying on a bed in the basement. And Dynel Lane was looming over her. Before Michelle could react, Dynel Lane broke a glass bottle over Michelle's head. Then she strangled her again. Michelle fought for her life. She fought for Aurora. She told Dynel, "I love you, you don't have to do this." She tried to use love to stop the violence. But Dynel Lane was on a mission. She choked Michelle until she lost consciousness a second time. And then, while Michelle was unconscious, the unthinkable happened. Dynel Lane used 2 kitchen knives. She performed a crude, horrific C-section. She cut Michelle open from hip to hip. She removed the baby, Aurora, from Michelle's womb. And then she left. She left Michelle bleeding to death on the basement floor. She took the baby upstairs. Michelle woke up. This is the part of the story that defies medical explanation. She woke up to a silence that was heavy and cold. She felt a burning pain in her stomach. She felt wetness. She looked down. She saw her intestines. She saw the blood. And she saw the emptiness. The realization hit her like a physical blow. My baby is gone. Panic tried to seize her throat. Grief tried to pull her into the darkness. But Michelle's brain went into a state of hyperclarity. She knew she was dying. She could feel the life draining out of her. But she had a thought, a singular driving thought. "If I die here, nobody will know what happened. Nobody will find Aurora." She realized she was locked in the basement. She tried to stand up. Imagine the strength that takes. Her core muscles were severed. Her body was in shock. She fell, she crawled. She found her phone. It was a miracle that it was still there. She dialed 911. The call came into the dispatcher at 2:41 p.m. The recording of this call is one of the most harrowing documents in true crime history. You hear a woman, her voice barely a whisper, gasping for air. "She cut me," Michelle whispers. "She cut my baby out of me." The dispatcher, stunned, tries to keep her on the line. "Who did this?" "I don't know," Michelle says. "A lady on Craigslist." Michelle is holding a towel to her stomach. She is literally holding her insides together. She is telling the dispatcher, "I'm bleeding out. I'm going to die." But she doesn't close her eyes. She stays on the line. She gives the address. She listens for the sirens. Every breath is a battle. Every second is an eternity. She is alone in the dark, in the house of the woman who stole her child, waiting for a savior. Meanwhile, upstairs, A different drama was unfolding. Dynel Lane's husband, David, came home early from work. He found his wife covered in blood. Dynel told him a lie. She told him, "I miscarried. The baby came early." She showed him the baby in the bathtub. David, horrified and panicked, grabbed the baby and his wife and drove them to the hospital. He passed the police cars, rushing to his own house. He didn't know that the real mother of that child was dying in his basement. When the police arrived at the house, they kicked down the door. They searched the house. They heard a weak cry from the basement. They ran down the stairs. They found Michelle. The officers were seasoned veterans. They had seen shootings, stabbings, car wrecks. But they had never seen this. One officer later said he had to look away for a second to compose himself, because the cruelty was so absolute. They applied pressure. They carried her out. Michelle looked at the officer and asked one question: "Is my baby okay?" The officer didn't have the heart to tell her he didn't know. He just said, "We're getting you help." Michelle was rushed to the hospital. She was in surgery for hours. She had lost more than half her blood volume. The surgeons worked to repair the damage. They stitched her uterus. They stitched her muscle. They stitched her skin. Against all odds, against every medical prediction, Michelle Wilkins lived. But while she was fighting for her life, the tragedy of Aurora was being confirmed. At the hospital where Dynel Lane went, doctors examined the baby. The baby was deceased. Dynel Lane claimed she had given birth, but the doctors knew immediately. They examined Dynel. She showed no signs of having given birth. They examined the baby. The baby was 34 weeks old. Then the news came from the police at the house. "We have a woman with a C-section wound in the basement." The pieces clicked together. Dynel Lane was arrested right there in the hospital. Michelle woke up in the ICU the next day. Her family was there. They had to tell her the news. They had to tell her that she had survived, but Aurora had not. The grief of a mother losing a child is profound. The grief of a mother losing a child in this way is incomprehensible. But Michelle Wilkins did not let the grief destroy her. She made a decision in that hospital bed. She decided that Dynel Lane had taken her baby, but she would not take her soul. She would not take her capacity for love. The trial of Dynel Lane began in 2016. Michelle Wilkins walked into the courtroom. She didn't come in a wheelchair, she walked. She stood tall. She looked at the woman who had invited her in for tea and then butchered her. Dynel Lane refused to look at her. She stared at the table. Michelle took the stand. She told the jury everything. She told them about the glass bottle. She told them about the choking. She told them about the darkness. She was the voice for herself, and she was the voice for Aurora. The jury was horrified. The evidence was overwhelming. But there was a legal controversy. In Colorado at the time, there was no fetal homicide law that applied perfectly to this case, because the coroner could not definitively prove that Aurora took a breath outside the womb. Therefore, Dynel Lane could not be charged with murder. This outraged the public. How could you cut a viable baby out of a mother, causing its death, and not be charged with murder? Instead, she was charged with attempted first-degree murder of Michelle, an unlawful termination of a pregnancy. The verdict came back: guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Dynel Lane to * 100 years in prison. She will never walk free again. She will die in a cell just as she left Michelle to die in a basement. But the most powerful moment of the entire saga wasn't the verdict. It was Michelle's statement. She stood up in court and addressed Dynel Lane directly. She didn't scream, she didn't curse. She spoke with a quiet, devastating power. She said, "Dynel, you left me there to die. You stole my daughter, you stole my innocence, but you did not steal my life." She talked about forgiveness, not forgiveness for Dynel's sake, but for her own. She said she refused to live in the prison of hatred. Michelle's perspective shifts the narrative entirely. Usually, a crime like this is about the perpetrator's madness. Michelle made it about the victim's strength. She talked about the primal will to live. She described lying on that floor and visualizing a light. She visualized her breath moving in and out. She forced her body to stay alive because she knew she had a purpose. In the years since, Michelle has become a beacon of light. She travels, she speaks, she makes art,